Welcome to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. We believe life is about how we react. All right, welcome to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. We're excited you're tuning in today, and we have a very special interview that we are excited to share with you. It's special because we actually got to watch the film behind this guy's story. If you haven't seen it or heard of it yet, you must check it out. It's called Walk in My Shoes. This documentary is free and available on YouTube. Clint Moore is going to join us in just a few minutes. Clint is the father of Chandler, who lives with cystinosis. Clint is also very involved with the Cystinosis Research Network too. But before we get into our conversation with Clint, Kyle, we've got some things to check in on. Last week, you talked about closing on your condo and getting with HOA to make some advancements. And where are we at with that?
Yeah, so last time we checked in about this, I mentioned that they wanted to wait until I'm an owner. And that made me a little nervous, right? But my nerves were put to rest. On Tuesday, I had a phone call between me, my architect, and the maintenance guy at the condo complex. And it went really well, and it truly was a matter of, he was just apprehensive. Like, if he said something that made me not want to buy, like, he doesn't know me, right?
Yeah.
So it was just a factor of that, and they truly are interested in accommodating my needs.
Nice.
And so that was real cool, and we're gonna move from there. So that's good progress.
Great. Well, nice work. Glad you're moving in the right direction there and glad it's working out okay with them. My one thing last week was all about my old Mac, right? 27-inch monitor sitting on the kitchen table. And although it's still there, Kyle, I will tell you, I have reassembled the computer so it's ready to go. And I looked up the address and phone number of where I can take it. The bummer is, I'm not making excuses, but they have banker's hours. So 9 to 5, Monday through Friday.
Yeah.
And this past week at work got a little wonky and crazier than expected. So I didn't quite get the chance to drop it off, but I know where to go and it's ready to go. So it's going to happen any day now.
Well, Sean, I am gonna consider that one done because I know you can do it. You can do it this week.
Yes, thank you very much. Well, with that, like I mentioned in the beginning, this interview and this conversation was a lot of fun for Kyle and I to chat with him in this regard. So, without further ado, please be sure to look up his film on YouTube. In the meantime, enjoy this conversation with Clint Moore.
Welcome to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast.
I appreciate you guys having me. I thank you for your time.
Absolutely. Clint, you and I met at Rare Disease Week. You are such a humble and unassuming character, I think. And so, we'll get into it a little more, but I just think it's so powerful when someone is so understated, but then, there's all this stuff that you're doing in the rare disease community and really fighting hard for people. And I just love to see that.
I appreciate that. I appreciate those words.
How does it feel when Kyle says you're understated? Does that bother you at all, or are you cool with that?
Kyle doesn't have the, I don't think he has the knowledge of just how many lives he has touched. Because once this podcast gets going, I'm going to tell one hell of a story that I think both of you are going to like to hear.
Awesome. Well, Clinton, it's cool for me to see you on our screen and to hear your voice. I got to watch your documentary over the course of the last week, and I really enjoyed not only your story, but principles of life that you and your wife and Chandler shared, and just overall beautiful picture. And it's neat to see your face and to hear your voice in my earphones and on my computer screen. So thanks so much for taking time out of your day.
Same here.
And, I think also for the sake of just conversation, I do want to make sure our listeners know that Clint is more of a man than Kyle or I will ever be. So, like 5 minutes ago, before we hit record, Clint's on the phone and we're just like, hey, how's your day? And literally, Clint tells us the story about how he's outside laying in a 100-year-old tree, like gets it out of the ground and puts it laying on the. I don't know what the
with his
what
bare
the
hands.
terminology is for this. So he comes inside, he cleans up a little bit, and then he gets on the phone with us. And I'm like, I would never do that. I don't even own a chainsaw, Clint. Like, I don't understand.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. Yeah, we've been 80 feet in the air this morning, and it didn't come down as gracefully as you may think. I mean, it made a lot of thumps, but it was unfortunately it was time to go. But yes, 10 minutes ago I ran in, I washed my face and my arms, I put on a clean shirt. I said I gotta catch this podcast.
Nice.
One thing I love about that dichotomy is kind of what Kyle said. You're a bit unassuming. You're a regular man. You're a regular dad, husband. Own a little bit of the land, and then you take care of life the way that it needs to be taken care of. And that's something we saw throughout the film, or something I noticed throughout the film. You guys just do what you need to do, and I love hearing that. And I'm excited to get into your story today.
Yeah. So we want to talk about the documentary because it really it encompasses a whole lot of your story. But going back to when we met at Rare Disease Week, can you tell us about, like, I remember you just saying to me real quick, and it's something that happens a lot in the rare disease community, I think. I've said this to so many people, we inspire each other to do things in our lives and for our communities, and I think that's a really beautiful thing about the rare disease community. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Attending Rare Disease Week, one of my favorite parts of that week has always been the first night when they have the cocktails and then everybody goes in for the rare disease documentary screening. And I believe it was it 2018 or 2017 that the Ataxian was shown?
Let's just say 2018. I think that's about right. Yeah.
I got it. So about that same time, the Cystinosis Research Network, the advocacy group that I'm currently part of, we were already working on a project to declare May the 7th as National Cystinosis Awareness Day. And the reason for May the 7th is the most common cause of cystinosis is caused by a 57 kb deletion. So the number 57 is very common in cystinosis. So we took the 57 and then made it 57, which is May the 7th. So we had that project going on already when I was sitting in that theater watching the Ataxian. And while sitting there, I was totally motivated and inspired by your guys' story, and I found myself actually, and I apologize for this, but I actually found myself losing focus on the film and sitting in the theater thinking, what can I be doing that is more on the physical and challenging side for an awareness raiser or a fundraiser than what I've been doing in the past. And the more I watched your film, the more I was inspired to come up with some sort of an idea. And the idea that I got was to actually walk a nonstop 57-mile walk, and it takes about 22 to 24 hours nonstop walking. We don't sit down, we don't stop for anything. And in doing so, my original plan was to create a documentary around that walking event. But as you saw on the film, that the walk is only a very small part of the film. And so once my production crew got here and filming started, and after talking to them, I said, there's so much more of a story than just the 57-mile walk. So the end product is what you guys saw, but you guys should actually pat yourselves on the back, because the creation of the Ataxian and me sitting in the theater actually led to the creation of my 57-mile walk, and then eventually the creation of this documentary.
That's really encouraging. I think that's why we all do what we do, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in the film, speaking of, you made a comment that I forget the line, but it said something about how you were watching a documentary and that inspired some different action. Would that be the documentary you're referring to in your film?
Yes, the documentary I referred to was the Ataxia.
Phew, because if you would have said no, I don't know what this conversation would have been.
You would have stopped recording and be like, you know what, this isn't working out.
No, not at all.
So you talk about this walk. Tell our listeners about the walk, just kind of the basics of how it worked. And, was this the second time it happened?
The walk that you see in the documentary actually is the second walk. The purpose of the walk was to do several things. One, it was to, of course, raise funds for the CRN. But two, it was to also raise awareness. And, I can't physically give myself cystinosis. It's not possible. So what I did was I created the walk to, in an attempt to mimic what my son goes through. Cystinosis is a very, and most rare diseases are very demanding. You have a very grueling medicine schedule that you need to, watch the clock. And in many rare diseases, it doesn't matter how compliant you are, or if you've never late on a dose, never miss a dose. You tend to still go downhill over time. And the purpose of the walk was the second year we put a lot more thought in it, and we actually held it at a school track, which is only a quarter mile long. And when you're doing 57 miles, that's 228 laps in the same never-ending loop. The scenery doesn't change, nothing. It's just monotonous as hell, right? So that was the purpose of it, to be totally monotonous, to be repetitive for 24 hours, and to show everybody that participated that even if you train hard and you do everything that you're supposed to do, over that 24 hours, your body's still going to go downhill. So it was an attempt to try and mimic a rare disease to the best that I could think of.
Wow. So tell us a little about cystinosis. You talk about that it's obviously taxing on the body. Why is that? Tell us a little bit about it.
Well, cystinosis is a very rare genetic metabolic lysosomal storage disorder. And what happens is your blood cells lack the ability to get rid of an amino acid called cysteine. The cysteine can get in the cell, but it can't get back out. So as a result, the cysteine level just keeps building and building and building. Eventually, it crystallizes and it destroys that cell. In return, it damages every organ in your body. It damages your muscles, your brain. Pretty much everything from head to toe is in some way affected. Usually, it's your kidneys and your eyes that are affected first. But even with the FDA-approved therapies that we have today, that slow the progression and actually gives a large portion of this cysteine, a piggyback ride out of the cells. Your levels are still elevated more than they were, or they would be if you did not have cystinosis. So over the long term, even on therapy, there's still damage being done.
And I mean, in the documentary, we saw Chandler, your son, taking his drugs every day through a tube in his belly. What are the main effects on somebody's life because of cystinosis?
Well, when you first get diagnosed, usually you're under 2 years old. You could be up to 3 years old, and by that point, you already have pretty significant kidney damage. So right away you start off with a buffet of all of these supplemental drugs like iron, potassium, bicarb, things like that. But as you get older and into your younger teenage years, you could develop end-stage kidney failure. You could start having muscle wasting issues, and then that prevents you from doing a lot of the things that you may want to do, like contact sports. My son's always wanted to play, tackle football, but his doctor's always said that's not a good idea, especially with bone health issues that my son has had
Right.
due to kidney health. But cystinosis is really a watch the clock medication. You're constantly looking at the time, alarms constantly going off, constantly every 4 hours, give or take. Taking oral drugs. We have an ophthalmic solution to preserve eyesight that has to be taken every hour while awake. So it's a very grueling medication schedule. Very, like I said, very watch the clock type disease.
So when you talk about that kind of regimen, does that make family vacations difficult? Are you able to travel away from home for a couple weeks at a time, or does that
Yeah,
hinder
yeah.
your guys' options?
Yeah. We've traveled. We've taken vacations. We've traveled, all over the country, go to cystinosis conferences and different meetings. But it requires a new level of packing. You have to,
Sure.
not only your clothes and your clean socks, but you also have to have another huge bag just for all of the medications. And in my son's cases, or in my son's case, he has to be catheterized due to some bladder issues that he's had. So you have to take catheters and and lubricant and wipes and bags, urine bags, and all these type things. So I think the hardest part of traveling is when you're in a car traveling for any more than an hour. You better be aware of or have some nifty techniques on how to stop and use the restroom, because this sort of kidney disease causes you to have a never-ending thirst, and in return you're going to have to you got to give all that water back. So we have pulled over on the shoulder of many back road over the last 15 years and watered the grass a little bit if we couldn't find a rest stop or
Right.
a rural farm or a Wawa or something nearby.
Tell us a little bit more about Chandler, your son.
Sure. Chandler was diagnosed at 10 months old. Ever since birth, he was actually a really, really good baby. I mean, he didn't cry all the time. When he was tired, he slept. He didn't fight his sleep. So we were blessed from the beginning. Today, he's 15 years old. And over the years, he's dealt with like these bladder issues that I've told you about, and having to place catheters the normal route proved to be very painful and kind of traumatic for him. So he opted to have a major surgery done to create something called a Mitrophanoff, which now he actually casts through his belly button. Through 2019 and early 2020, he went through a terrible bone disease issue, or a bone health issue. And it seemed like every time he twisted the wrong way, he kept snapping his fingers. Finally, at a conference in Philadelphia, the last night of the conference, the funnest 3 hours of the whole week, it was just a dinner dance. That's when you free time to hang out with your friends and do what you want. He had been in pain the whole time. He gave up, went upstairs, laid in bed, and totally snapped his femur into two pieces while laying in bed. So that gives you an idea of just how severe the bone health issue was. But I tell you, for a 15-year-old that has gone through as much as he's gone through, he never ceases to amaze me to just how happy he is. He's always looking for the positives. If something comes around that is going to cause a hospitalization or a surgery, he faces it head on. And then there's many times where he looks at me and he's like, let's just do it, schedule it, let's get it over with so I can move on. He's always been happy about going to school and hanging out with his friends. He's always enjoyed getting outside. So for the most part, he's just a normal, overly happy teenage boy that was just dealt this hand of cards that he's been forced to deal with. But in his own way, he has found a very happy and inspirational way to deal with it. So I think in return, it has filtered over into me and his mom, and we too now have a different look on how we face these these more troubling, traumatic times, where we just try to find the same attitude that he does, and we just fight through it and support him in any way we can, and get it over with and get back home and get back to our normal.
Get back to fallen trees and whatever you do out there.
You said that the walk was actually only part of the film, right? And to me, the real takeaway, the bottom line, was the character of your son. He says one of the lines was, I feel like if you smile while you're having this rough life, other kids will too. And oh my gosh, how much does that apply to every single person?
Absolutely. He has taught me so much in his short 15 years of life. It's unbelievable. I mean, I thought I knew it all, and it turns out I didn't really know much at all until he came along. I knew how to cut trees down, but I didn't know about, I didn't know anything about what matters in life. I was never exposed, or I really didn't know anything about the rare disease world until he came along. But he has taught me that there's so much more to life than myself, and I'm very appreciative of that.
Speaking of Clinton, there's something you said that I think is worth talking about. I don't want to steal from the film. In fact, I'll just remind our listeners, you've got to go see this film. It's on YouTube. Walk in My Shoes. Of course, we'll link it all in our show notes. But an amazing documentary that just came out in 2020. So it's still new and a beautiful piece. But in the beginning of this film, you talk about how you believed as one individual, there wasn't a whole lot you could do to make a difference. You didn't believe that you could do anything, that one person couldn't change the world. So can you tell us a little bit about that thought process and maybe how that has come to be a different perspective today?
Yeah, I always, I guess I didn't think about it much as a child, but once I became an adult, I honestly didn't feel like, I would watch the news and try to understand politics and things like that. And I was like, one person on the news talking, and I always laughed at them. I said, you're wasting your time. You're never going to make a difference all by yourself. You need an army of 1 million people behind you to have your voice heard and to even think about possibly making a difference. But as I got involved in the rare disease world, I started realizing that, and I guess it was because of I actually saw it happen. Was I was asked to go speak at a conference in Tampa, Florida, and I had never did any public speaking before, and really didn't want to do it. And and while I was on the plane, I was thinking, this is really a waste of my time. I'm one person. I'm not going to make a difference. But I went and I did my thing, and afterwards, a couple of people came to me and they said, you know what? They said, I never really thought about things the way that you did before. And they said, I realize now a couple things in my life that I was doing wrong. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. I'm only one guy. I can't possibly make a difference in the world. But then, eventually I got into fundraising and one person starting a fundraiser, eventually you had 600 people marching behind you. So I quickly learned that it seriously takes one person to start a movement that can seriously move thousands and thousands of people. And, until I actually got off of that little, Oreo-sized comfort zone, I didn't think it was possible, but it absolutely is possible. And the only thing that I regret is that I learned that lesson so late in life, because now I look back and think of, what could I have done, for the first 30 years of my life or 35 years of my life until I finally stepped off that cookie and actually started trying to make a difference on my own. So that's the only regret I have, was getting started too late.
But also, it's never too late, right?
Oh no,
Just taking that step, even no matter how late it is the important part.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I actually was just in a conversation this past week with another father that has a child with cystinosis, and his daughter was only diagnosed. It was less than 2 years ago, and he's already attended conferences. He went to Rare Disease Week with me this past February, and he currently he was showing interest in joining the CRN board, and we actually added him to our board. And I was talking to him on the phone, and I was like, "How long ago was your daughter diagnosed?" And he said, "It'll soon be 2 years." And I'm like, "Geez, man, you're making me look so bad, because it took me 8 years after my son's diagnosis before I was ready to step off." But he said something very, very intriguing, and he said, he said everybody gets involved when they're ready and in their own time. And he said, for me, it was a year and a half. He said, for you, it was 8 years. He said, but there's no right or wrong time to get involved. It's just great that we do. So.
Yep. Yeah. Same thing like for me and Sean. It took me almost 10 to take action. And Sean emailed me like 2 weeks after his diagnosis and was like, "All right, let's get started." So.
And now look at you. And now you're changing the world. You're creating documentaries that inspired other documentaries. You're doing podcasts. So now you guys are moving mountains.
We certainly hope we're having some sort of impact.
You definitely are. Definitely are.
Clint, let's get back to your walk.
Sure.
Because we know it's just a small piece of the film. When, I assume seeing the film, a lot of people are rallying for you at the beginning. A lot of people come out and cheer you on, and they might cheer you on for a couple hours or several hours. And then it seemed your crowd kind of whittled down in the middle of the night, and then all of a sudden it got big again toward the end.
Yeah.
So I can only imagine the middle of the night is the hard part.
Yes.
So we're curious, when you're walking through, I don't know, 10 hours or so of darkness, what are some of the things going through your head? Those trees you got to cut down, like what is going through your mind in the middle of 200 and some odd laps?
Well, that's a really good question, and it really depends on which shoulder you're asking. I had this little guy on one shoulder saying, "Keep going, keep going, keep going," and the guy on the other shoulder is like, "You're an idiot. You need to go home and go to bed." But honestly, the first year that I did the walk was it was a lot more challenging than it was this past year for several reasons. One is right when it got dark on the first year, I had 2 other people that was trying to walk the entire 57 miles with me, and I honestly thought that both of them would continue all the way through to the end, but they got hurting so bad, and the conditions were so miserable. We had tornadoes nearby. We had severe thunderstorms the first year. Our route got flooded. It was literally probably close to knee-deep water, so we had to abandon that. And I'm not gonna lie, it just sucked. And I think at 1 o'clock in the morning, one of the other 2 tapped out. He's like, "I'm really sorry, bro, but I can't take another step." An hour later, the other person tapped out. So now I'm like, "Oh my God, now I'm by myself." And from 2 o'clock in the morning until the sun came up, I talked myself into quitting probably 45 times. But this second year, we had more people attempt to do the entire 57, as well as we had people that said, "I only want to walk a portion of it, but I'm going to come out and walk the middle of the night portion with you just to keep you company." So that made it easier because I didn't have as much time to think about the pain that I was in or think about quitting for whatever reasons, because they kept my mind occupied. But honestly, the biggest challenge of the 57-mile walk, I would say, is mental. It's physical, yes, but the mental challenge of those overnight hours is extremely challenging. And what little bit of time I did have when I was by myself, I found myself thinking about certain individuals in the cystinosis community. I mean, of course, my son was always on my mind, but recently, right before the walk began, the cystinosis community had just lost two members, or two patients had passed away just within a week of that walk. So I found myself thinking about them a lot and their families, and a lot of the other patients that I knew that weren't doing well or were having some sort of more major issues going on. I was thinking about them a lot, and those type thoughts, and the one or two text messages that you get at 3 a.m. from somebody that got up to use the restroom, they kind of push you forward, and it's kind of like when you're fishing, right? You ever go fishing and you spend all day, you don't even have a single bite, and then all of a sudden you catch a fish and now you're all pumped up and you can stay for the whole 3 or 4 more hours. It's kind of like that when you receive that one text message at 2 a.m. You're starting to die down, but then you get that one text that kind of pumps you back up. So mentally challenging all night long is an understatement, really.
Totally. I remember a part from our Race Across America journey, where in the documentary, and I only remember this because it was caught on film, but I say that it's amazing how you can support the cause just by thinking about it and expressing that support. And that's like that text in the middle of the night, right? Like, that's support for the cause. Yeah, you can write a check, but you can also type a text to Clint when he's walking at 3 a.m. and that helps the cause as well.
Absolutely. I actually have a lady that her name is Claire Johnstone that works very, very close with CRN. Prior to the walk, and I didn't know she did this, she had collected statements from community members, and all night long, or for the first probably half of the night, she would send me one at a time.
Oh, wow.
To let me see what some of the community members were saying, and a lot of them were just you're doing great, I'm so proud of you. Just little things like that really are enough to lift you up and get you through another mile.
Totally.
What's the recovery like when you hit that 57th mile marker and it's time to wrap up and go home? Are you out for a couple days, couple hours, couple weeks? Like, what is the next couple hours like?
Well, let me tell you this really quick story. I did an interview earlier this week. It was just a phone interview. There was no video. And the guy actually made a comment. He said, I noticed in the film that your son is very, very happy and smiling all the time. And he said, Clinton, you didn't really smile all that much until you got toward the end of the film. And I said, well, let me explain why. 90% of the interviews that you saw of me in that film were literally the day after that walk. So what you did not see was me trying to get into my vehicle and drive a half hour east of here and get into a house that my producer had rented and turned into a studio. When I got to his house, him and his team came out, and I was on crutches, and they helped me get into that house and into that chair, and I could not feel my legs from the time I sat down to the time I left. And I was in excruciating pain during all of those interviews. And I would say in total, it probably took me probably 4 or 5 days for most of the pain to subside. It was probably, and I'm not exaggerating, it was probably 2.5 months before I would say that my legs actually felt normal again. And for some reason, this past year, I don't know what I did, but I actually had one of my toenails turned black within a week after the walk, and it took almost a year for that toenail to heal up.
Wow.
So, the blisters heal up over time, that you get on your feet, but it is very, very physically challenging. And I was so proud of myself because I was super prepped. I prepared for that walk months in advance and walked every single day. Every single day, I was clocking 7 to 10 miles every single day.
Wow.
And I walked to the point where I was just so sick of walking. I was like, oh my God, I'm so sick of walking. But going into it, I was so ready. And the day of the walk, we actually had two retired Marine Corps members tapped out. And I was like, you're a Marine. Marines don't quit, they die. Marines die before they tap out. And they quit. And I was like, holy crap, I just outwalked a Marine. And that made me feel good. But oh my gosh, it is very physically challenging. And honestly, I probably don't really feel like myself for probably 3 to 4 weeks after.
Wow.
As I can imagine you guys felt after your ride.
Yeah.
Well, not that night. That night, it was like catching a fish, right? We were pumped. I think we went out and found some random diner open at 2 a.m. and we all picked out on hamburgers and milkshakes.
That's right.
But the
No
next
doubt.
day, somebody woke me up at
Yeah.
like 10 a.m. Hey, it's time to clean the RV. And I was like, no, it's not. Get out.
Well, Clint, it's been an absolute pleasure to connect with you. I'm so glad we had this opportunity, and I'm really looking forward to the next time I see you at an event and we can sit down and have a cup of coffee or something. It's been a pleasure, and you know what? I'm really looking forward to meeting Chandler as well. He put out so much wisdom in that documentary. He just seemed like an incredible young man, and you guys did an amazing job raising him. It's just been a real pleasure hanging out with you. Thanks so much for being on the podcast today.
I appreciate you guys having me, but I really would like to keep talking for another couple of hours because once this is over, I have to go back and fire that chainsaw back up.
Yeah, sounds like a great day.
Yeah.
Hey, before you go, Clint, tell our listeners about the film itself. Where do we find it? What's the underlying message from it? Tell us
film
about that.
is titled Walk in My Shoes. It can be found on YouTube. It can also be found under the Cystinosis Research Network's website, cystinosis.org. And it's really a film about strength and perseverance and overcoming challenges and obstacles, finding an inspiration when it looks like it's just going to be a really dark day. You can actually find a way to make it an inspirational and a good day. I think my son knocks it out of the park many times within that film, where he really shows his strength at such a young age. One thing that I remember telling my producer was, I do not want, and I'm not interested in creating a documentary that is just this sad story. I think he totally nailed it by creating a more inspirational, uplifting story. Although a couple of people have called me, they said, oh my gosh, it's so sad. I'm like, well, some people can look at it as being sad, but most people have found it to be uplifting, inspirational, and a video or a film that really pushes them forward and keeps them wanting to fight. And some has actually called me and said, hey, now that I watched your film, I want to be more involved.
Yeah.
I appreciate you guys taking the time to watch it and for having me on this podcast. It means a lot.
Sean, I think this conversation really illustrates the power of the rare disease community. We really inspire each other, right? As we said in the conversation. And, Clint embodies that. He takes inspiration from other people and he puts it back out into the community. And it's just an absolutely beautiful thing. So I really Really enjoyed that conversation. We're going to jump into one things. And so, Sean, what is the one thing that you're going to do this week that is going to move towards a goal?
Um, well, I don't know that I have a big goal in mind for it, but I don't like clutter. I don't like things to be out of place. It drags me down emotionally and mentally. And in my room, I went out and bought some foam pads for the audio, for the walls. What do you call them? Whatever. Get everything like reinstalled. My
Yeah.
first go at it didn't work. Things were falling. I set piles aside because I just haven't had time. So this week I'm gonna get my room dialed in a little bit more. And when I say room, I mean my room/studio.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and you pointed out that it's not exactly a huge goal, but you said it was for your emotional stability, and we all know how important that is. We do not want to deal with an unstable Sean
Sean.
Baumstark.
Yeah. That's
Nobody wants
fair.
that.
Okay,
No.
how about yours, Kyle? Let's leave Sean alone. What are you working on this week?
Well, so at the beginning of the Red Attacks at Global Challenge, it actually started September 25th, goes for 1 month. And so on October 24th, we finish. And my goal at the beginning was to ride 400 miles during that time. And I need to finish that up this week, so I'll get it done.
That was a beautiful commercial, by the way. A nice little plug. Speaking of, rideataxia.org/global challenge if you're
Thank you.
curious.
Yeah, perfect.
So let's wrap up with some thank you notes. We believe it's important to express some gratitude. So we've made it a habit every episode to at least identify one thing or one person we're grateful for. So I'll start actually. I want to say a big thank you to a lot of my online friends and followers. I'll save the story for episode 125, the next episode. But last week had a bit of a disappointing encounter with a business, and I took that frustration and that disappointment to my social media channels
Yeah.
and had a lot of people rally behind me and apply a little bit of pressure on the
Nice.
company. So I'm really grateful that people just saw where I was coming from and understood the discrepancy or the opportunity in service that this company had displayed. So I'm just grateful that I wasn't all by myself.
Nice. Yeah, I like that a lot. I mean, you put stuff out into the world and just hope people are gonna understand. And
Yeah.
it's gratifying when that happens. So my thank you this week goes to Team Barrett, and they are a team in the Ready Taxi Global Challenge.
Oh, look at that.
And
Another plug.
yeah, it's all over. And they had I rode with them here in Philly because they have some family local. They also have some family in Columbus and some in Michigan. They're doing all little rides with 6 or 8 people at each one. But just, I really appreciate the effort because this year has been crazy and it's been so easy to be like, we just won't do that. But no, people are getting inventive and making something happen. So thank you to Team Barron for doing that.
Well, with that wraps up episode 124. Thank you again for tuning in today. Clint, thank you for the amazing interview and message. We look forward to chatting with you all next week. Until then,
keep living with urgency. Thank you for listening to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast.
Find us online at twodisableddudes.com and subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
special thanks to our friend and audio producer, Jake Tompkins.